Let's return then to the situation in Libya. Earlier, U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton condemned the events unfolding in the country and says the Obama administration is watching the situation with alarm. She says the violence committed against anti-government activists are completely unacceptable.
The United States continues to watch the situation in Libya with alarm. Our thoughts and prayers are with those whose lives have been lost and their loved ones. And we join the international community in strongly condemning the violence, as we've received reports of hundreds killed and many more injured. This bloodshed is completely unacceptable. It is the responsibility of the government of Libya to respect the universal rights of their own people, including their right to free expression and assembly.
Well, joining me from New York is Mona Eltahawy, a journalist and commentator on the Middle East and the Arab world. Thank you very much for joining us. We've seen this revolutionary contagion across the Middle East, but Libya is a very different country to Egypt and Tunisia, is it not?
It's different, but it's also similar in many ways. Let me explain the similarity first. I think what you have to see about Libya is that it lies on a continuum of this freedom rally. Tunisia showed us that it was possible to overthrow a dictator. Egypt showed us that it was possible to throw a very entrenched dictator who was also one of America's best friends in the Middle East. And now what Libya is showing us is what basically this kind of psychopathic dictator can do to his people when they try to overthrow him. And they will overthrow him, because we saw a very desperate man speaking today. Gaddafi knows that his days are numbered. So I think what it's teaching the region is that even when the people who want freedom have the worst thrown at them, even when we've seen more than 500 killed in 7 days, they will continue to fight for freedom, and they can do it. And that is an intoxicating message for the region. It's not about oil for the region. The rest of the world might be worried about oil, but the region is ecstatic to see the freedom rally continue, heartbroken at the deaths, but knowing that they will overthrow Gaddafi.
I suppose the stark difference between the three is perhaps the role of the military and how they have perhaps reacted in the situation of Tunisia and Egypt, very much not turning on their own people. But however, in Libya, this is a very different situation.
Absolutely. What we saw in Tunisia was, as you said, the armed forces refused to open fire, and Zain al-Abidine Ben Ali even fired the head of the army because of that. In Egypt, the army weren't total saints, because we heard that military police had arrested and tortured people, but they refused to open fire on pro-democracy demonstrators. What we're seeing in Libya, I think, is not just the armed forces, but also the mercenaries that we've heard of, that he's brought in from other countries in Africa, but also the alliances that he has bought using Libya's oil money. Gaddafi always sent out money abroad and brought out basically tribal loyalties. But we're seeing people from the armed forces in Libya refusing to open fire on Libyans. We hear of this more and more every day, and they themselves are suffering, and Gaddafi has unleashed violence on them. But more importantly, we're hearing of tribes that are turning against Gaddafi, and I think this really is the tidal wave. He keeps warning of a civil war. There won't be a civil war in Libya. The war is by Gaddafi against his people, and his people are winning.
Mona, I'm just interested to find out your reaction to the fallen regime so far. In that respect, I'm speaking about Egypt and Tunisia, of course. What role do you think the international community should play in ensuring that these regimes do get on the right road to democracy, in perhaps democracy, I say that in Western terms?
Well, I think the countries that the West generally, especially the United States and the European Union, have relationships with, such as Egypt. What can happen there is, we hear of this great relationship between the US military and the Egyptian military, which is running Egypt right now. So, you can apply pressure on that. You can also apply pressure using those kind of traditional modes or networks of diplomacy. The problem comes to a country like Libya, that has, for a long time, Libya was considered a pariah state. And it really only opened up after the embargo was lifted and Gaddafi paid compensation to various victims of his terrorism.
No, I apologise in interrupting you there, but we are going to have to leave it there. We've run out of time. But thank you very much for joining us. Mona Eltahawy there.